He walked the hospital halls in silence, blue scrubs clean, his posture upright, and a stethoscope swinging lightly against his chest. In one hand, he held a mop, not because he belonged to janitorial staff, but because someone had left it in the middle of the corridor and patients walked these halls. To him, safety mattered more than image. But to her, the nurse rounding the corner with a clipboard in hand and impatience in her eyes, he wasn't a surgeon. He was a shadow, a misplaced figure, a mistake in motion. "You missed a spot," she snapped, her finger pointing to a streak of water by the wall. Her tone wasn't one of inquiry, it was instruction. He didn't answer. He didn't correct her. He didn't have time. Seconds later, the hospital's calm shattered. The intercom screamed urgent and raw, "Code red, cardiac arrest, OR3, Dr. Harris, stat." Her face drained. Her mouth opened, but he was already moving. Gone in a flash of controlled urgency, the mop left behind like an unspoken lesson. Before we begin, have you ever been mistaken for less than who you are? Then maybe you already understand what happens next. Drop your city in the comments and stay for a story where silence walks in scrubs and saves lives without needing to say a word. Dr. Elijah Harris moved through St. Arlen Memorial with a stillness that came from discipline, not fear. At 36, he had spent more than a decade mastering trauma surgery, stitching together lives in the split seconds most people froze. He was board certified, fellowship trained, published in journals, and quietly regarded by those who truly knew medicine. But none of that stopped the sideways glances. None of that quieted the way eyes drifted to his skin before his name badge. Every day, no matter the lives he saved, Elijah carried the invisible weight of having to prove, again and again, that he belonged in a white coat. St. Arlen Memorial was a temple of perfection. Gleaming tile, art on the walls, elevators that whispered shut. Its reputation was built not just on care, but on image. Here, power flowed in subtle nods and stitched lapels, measured more often in perception than performance. Nurse Lauren Hale had learned to rise through that system. She was quick, competent, respected. She moved with the practiced air of someone who'd been rewarded for efficiency and precision. But that same precision, sharpened by the institution around her, came with a flaw. She trusted what she saw more than what she knew. And what she saw that morning was a black man in scrubs holding a mop. She didn't ask. She assumed. "You missed a spot," she said, not looking up from her clipboard as she gestured toward a damp streak near the wall. Elijah didn't respond. Not because he couldn't, but because he didn't need to. He had seen this play out before, many times. Words wouldn't change it. Only actions would. What she didn't know was that he had picked up the mop after noticing the spill. A patient had nearly slipped. No janitor was nearby. And so, without ego or hesitation, he took care of it. Because in his world, saving someone didn't require a spotlight. The silence between them lingered, not as a void, but as a choice. Because Elijah Harris wasn't quiet out of weakness. He was quiet because he was focused. And soon, that focus would be the only thing standing between life and death. The hallway buzzed with the low murmur of clipped footsteps and routine orders, but Lauren Hale's voice cut through it like a blade. "You janitors need to be faster," she said sharply, not bothering to lower her voice or lift her eyes. A couple of staffers glanced up from their tablets and chuckled under their breath, the kind of laughter that didn't erupt, but seeped in, just loud enough to humiliate. Dr. Elijah Harris stood still, expression unreadable, the mop still in his hand. He didn't flinch. He didn't defend. Lauren walked over briskly, heels tapping hard against the polished floor. "Go find housekeeping," she added, snatching the mop from his hand like it was a mistake he'd dared to make. "This wing is for surgery." And then chaos cracked the silence. The intercom erupted overhead, urgent and clear. "Code red. Cardiac arrest. OR 3. Dr. Harris stat." Everything stopped. Lauren froze, still gripping the mop like a sword turned against her. Her eyes lifted slowly, registering the words. Then the silence stretched, raw and thick. Heads turned. Someone near the nurse's station whispered, "Wait, he's Dr. Harris." Elijah didn't look at her, didn't say a word. He didn't gloat, didn't smile, didn't even pause. He just moved, swiftly, directly toward the operating room. The hallway parted for him like it finally understood what it had tried to diminish. The laughter had vanished. Lauren stood there, the mop still clutched in her hand, her grip tightening as her face drained. She didn't say a word. But the shame? It said enough. Inside OR3, the world shrank to seconds and skill. Monitors beeped like a heartbeat on edge, and the lights above burned white against urgency. Dr. Elijah Harris stood at the center of it all, gloved hands steady, voice low and firm, as he issued instructions with the precision of a conductor. His eyes didn't flinch. His movements were fluid, practiced. Every incision, every clamp, every command a silent argument against every assumption ever made about him. Around him, the surgical team worked in sync, but one pair of hands trembled slightly. Nurse Lauren Hales. She stood across from him, helping, holding, obeying each instruction. Her clipboard was gone, her tone silenced. She didn't dare look up, didn't speak unless directed. The man she had dismissed not 30 minutes ago now held a life in his hands, and the room, heavy with tension, revolved around him. When the flat line faded into rhythm, and the red alarms gave way to steady green, a different kind of quiet settled in. The patient was stabilized. The procedure was over. But the reckoning had just begun. Later, in the break room, the hum of a vending machine filled the space where apologies didn't quite know how to live. Elijah stood alone, sipping cold coffee, his scrubs stained with effort, his eyes tired but resolute. The door opened quietly. Lauren stepped in. She didn't speak at first, just stood there, fidgeting with her badge, eyes unsure where to land. Finally, her voice, stripped of its sharpness, broke the silence. "I didn't know," she said, almost a whisper. Elijah looked at her, not with anger, not with revenge, but with the calm depth of someone who's carried too many moments like this. "That's the point," he said gently. "You didn't ask. You assumed." The words didn't rise. They settled, like truth often does, somewhere beneath the skin. Lauren nodded, her throat tight, her face flushed. There was no defense, only acknowledgement. Elijah didn't linger. He finished his coffee, placed the cup in the bin, and walked out. Not triumphant, not bitter, just tired. Because this wasn't the first time, and he knew, deep in his bones, it wouldn't be the last. A week later, the staff of St. Arlen Memorial gathered in the hospital's largest conference room. The lights dimmed and chairs filled with white coats, blue scrubs, and clipped badges. It was a formal gathering, one of those monthly assemblies where titles are reinforced and policies repeated. But today felt different. There was a hush in the room before it even began, as if something was about to shift. The chief of surgery stepped up to the podium, his voice calm, practiced. "Today," he began, "we're honored to officially introduce someone whose work has not only elevated this hospital, but has already begun to change the way we treat trauma care across the country. A low murmur swept through the crowd. Whispers. Then came the slide, projected onto the wall behind him. Dr. Elijah Harris, Director of Trauma Innovation. The title glowed beneath a photo of Elijah standing beside a makeshift operating table in a dusty tent, a young girl's hand wrapped around his, her body still wrapped in blood-stained gauze. Gasps were quiet, but present. "He's been with us for years," the chief continued. "But what many of you don't know is that Dr. Harris recently returned from a 3-month mission with Médecins Sans Frontières, where he developed a mobile surgical unit used in active war zones. He saved over 200 lives abroad, many of them children, and brought home a technology we now use in our own ER during mass casualty events." Another slide appeared. Elijah, in fatigues, performing surgery beneath a canvas roof as gunfire echoed in the distance. A ripple of silence moved across the crowd. Not discomfort, respect. Lauren sat in the third row, back straight, hands folded tight in her lap. Her eyes didn't leave the screen, but her mind drifted. She remembered the hallway, the way his hand had closed around the mop, the way her voice had cut through the air that morning, filled with false certainty and assumption. She remembered how he hadn't looked back, not once. And now, the same man she'd mistaken for a janitor stood calmly at the front of the room, stepping to the microphone, not for validation, but for vision. "I never set out to prove anything," Elijah said quietly. "I just wanted to make sure no one died waiting to be seen." Lauren felt her throat tighten, because now she understood. He wasn't saving lives to be noticed. He was saving lives despite being ignored. And as the applause slowly rose around her, Lauren clapped too. But inside, all she could feel was the weight of that mop in her hand, and the moment it should have told her everything she needed to know. Dr. Elijah Harris didn't change, not in the ways that headlines hoped he would. He didn't seek interviews or revel in the spotlight his promotion had brought. He showed up the next morning as he always had, coffee in hand, stethoscope slung casually around his neck, chart in one hand, purpose in the other. The OR remained his sanctuary, and saving lives his rhythm. The only difference now was that when he passed through the halls of St. Arlen Memorial, fewer eyes looked past him. More looked with clarity, recognition. People began saying his name with a reverence once reserved for the marble plaques in the lobby. Residents whispered stories about the surgeon who was mistaken for a janitor, not as gossip, but as gospel. Nurses corrected each other now, not for protocol, but for perception. And somewhere in the undercurrent of change, silence began to shift its meaning. It no longer felt heavy with dismissal. It began to hum with acknowledgement. Lauren Hale felt that shift most deeply. She didn't run from it. She met it head-on. A few days after the announcement, she approached Elijah directly, not with an apology wrapped in performance, but with something real. "I want to learn," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "From you, if you'll let me rotate on your trauma rounds." Elijah looked at her for a long moment, not to make her squirm, but to weigh what wasn't being said. He nodded. "If you're here to learn, not to erase what happened, then yes." She exhaled, grateful, not for forgiveness, but for the chance to grow past the line she had once drawn so carelessly. In the weeks that followed, something in the culture of the hospital began to evolve, slowly, subtly, like scar tissue forming over something that had finally been acknowledged. Junior staff were told, "Before you assume, remember Dr. Harris." It became a mantra, a quiet checkpoint, a reminder that not every lesson in medicine comes from textbooks. Some are learned in the moments we misjudge, and choose differently next time. Elijah continued to walk the same white halls. The scrubs stayed blue. The walls stayed clean. The names on the plaques didn't change. But the way people paused before they spoke, before they assigned, dismissed, decided, was different. And in that stillness, something rare finally emerged. Not just awareness, but respect. Not because Elijah demanded it, but because he earned it, silently, every day, until silence itself began to speak. They saw the mop. They missed the man. They saw blue scrubs and brown skin and made their assumptions, loud in tone and quiet in care. But when the heart flatlined and seconds became lifelines, the intercom didn't call for perception, it called for skill. And the name they had dismissed in a hallway, mocked with smirks and silence, became the only name that mattered. Dr. Elijah Harris answered, not with ego, not with spite, but with precision, grace, and a heartbeat restored. Have you ever been mistaken for what you look like instead of who you are? Have you ever walked into a room that decided your worth before you even spoke? Then you already understand Dr. Harris. Drop your reflections below. Your story might mirror his. Like this, if you believe greatness doesn't always wear a name tag. Follow for more stories where dignity walks in quietly and leaves a room forever changed. Thank you for watching. Until next time, never underestimate the quiet ones. They might just save your life.